Binkley, and I'm on BAFTA's Games Committee. And first, I'd just like to say that tonight's event is part of BAFTA's year-round programme to share the knowledge, talent and advice of industry experts in film, TV and, of course, video games. If you'd like to find out more about the benefits of BAFTA membership, which includes voting in the Games Awards, discounted tickets to all awards ceremonies, screenings and events here at BAFTA and across the UK, plus the use of the fabulous bar out there, then I think you've all been given a little document with more information on that you can look up to. But now on with the main event, and it's tonight's BAFTA Annual Games Lecture, sponsored by Autodesk. And the annual lecture is an opportunity to take stock of the gaming industry is today and just reflect on where we are now and offer a personal vision for the future of gaming. And obviously we've got a very special person to deliver that tonight. BAFTA's ultimate mission, if you like, is to celebrate excellence in the art form of the moving image. And I think our speaker tonight has certainly done a huge amount to help establish gaming as a serious and spectacular storytelling medium and art form. But before I welcome him to the stage, we've got a little bit of a video to show you now, just to whet your appetites. Right, I think that's warmed us up nicely. So please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage with associate producer Sean Eyestone, Mr. Hideo Kojima. Now we're doing this in a slightly more sort of interactive format than we have done previously with annual lectures. So we're going to be having a conversation. I'm going to be asking Mr. Kojima a few of my own questions first, and then we're going to open it up to some audience questions later on. I believe if you are using Twitter during this and you want to follow what other people are saying, the hashtag is BAFTA Lecture, if you want to do that. But let's get cracking. So, obviously, it's the 25th anniversary of Metal Gear, and we've just seen on the screen quite dramatically how the series has evolved in that time. When you began making games, I saw a quote where you said you felt like the world was waiting to see what video games could be and what they could become, and you saw great potential in them from the perspective of someone who was a big movie lover and wanted to tell stories. Now, comparing Metal Gear as it is today to the original MSX version, did you always believe that games would come this far, or were you surprised by what you've been able to achieve in 25 years?
正直25年前に作った時はこんなにゲームのハードが進化して表現力が上がるとは思っていませんでした。
Quite honestly, it's surprising to me. 25 years ago, I never really imagined that game hardware would evolve this far so quickly.
ただそれで満足しているかというと全然そうではないです。
But if the question is whether or not I'm happy with where it is, the question is the answer is no.
例えば絵を描くときに自分が描きたい絵を頭にイメージします。
For example, if you're going to create a piece of art, you first image it in your head.
で25年間描き続けてきたんでそれなりの技術力もつきましたし、絵の具も、画材も進化して色数も増えてきたんですけども、やっぱり最初にイメージしているものってなかなか作れてないので、それができるまでは、ゲームは作り続けたいと思っています。
And that original image popped into my head 25 years ago. For 25 years, I've been trying to recreate that image in the form of a game. And the amount of tools I have available to me has changed. It's increased. I have more colors available to me in my palette. I have more tools available to me. But I still haven't been able to achieve that original image that I had in my head. And until I'm able to achieve that, I'll keep on creating games.
本当は実際に温度とか匂いを感じるようなものでゲームを作りたいです。それがまた表現としてできる。そういうのが将来できるようになれば、もっと自分のイメージに近づいていく。
I think, at some point, if we can attain a point where games are truly immersive and you can feel things like temperature or smells, then I think at that point it'll come, very close to what I originally had in mind, and at that point, maybe I'll be satisfied.
Okay. Now, as a child, you watch, as I understand, a movie almost every day with your family, and you'd all discuss it, and that kindled your passion for cinema and storytelling. And before making games, I think you even wrote some novels as well. So I'm interested in what films, games and books, old and new, have inspired you, and how those inspirations and influences manifest themselves in your games.
まあ、僕その映画が好きで、僕の体の 70% は映画でできているってよく言ってます。
Well, I am a huge movie fan, and I've said in the past that 70% of my existence is movies.
なのでまあ、今日BAFTAでレクチャーというかそのセッションできるので非常に光栄に感じています。
So being able to come here and speak here at BAFTA is really a great honor for me.
まあ、子供の頃からずっと映画とか本を読んできて、その何か一本というのじゃなくて、映画を吸収してその、僕の体内に入ったもので、ゲーム作りをして、その結果がメタルギアソリッドになるということなので、この映画がどうのこうのっていうのは、まあ、ここで言えないんです。
And of course, I've been watching, lots of movies ever since I was young. Movies and novels have really shaped my existence. And over the past 25 years, I've applied that to Metal Gear Solid. And it's really a culmination of all these various movies and influences that have allowed me to create Metal Gear Solid. So it's not one particular work that has really influenced me.
まあ、ただキューブリックの2001年宇宙の旅という大好きな映画があるんですけども、ストーリーとか、グラフィックとかいうよりも映画を見て、まあ、人類が月に行くよりも以前に、宇宙に行ったような感覚を、味わわせてくれた映画なんで、ああいう感じで、まあ、僕もゲームを作れたらいいなと思ってます。
But if I had to name one particular movie, it would possibly be Stanley Kubrick's 2001: Space Odyssey. It's not so much that I like the particular, the story or anything particular about it. It's more just the feeling that I got from it. It was made at a point in time where we hadn't been to the moon yet, and yet it really made people excited about going into space and really, gave people dreams and got people thinking. And I think, that really inspired me, and that's what I try to accomplish with my games.
Okay, great. Now, I wanted to get a sense for how your approach to storytelling has evolved over the years, but in tandem with advances in technology. What would come first for you making games? The story or the design, or do they by necessity have to develop simultaneously? And how do you balance the storytelling with also giving the player meaningful action? And I suppose just to tag on to the end of that as well, what this means for storytelling, the fact that Ground Zeroes is an open world game.
僕はそのゲームデザインと物語を、一人で並行して作ってます。
Well, first of all, when it comes to game design and story, I think of both of them, by myself, and I do it simultaneously in parallel.
でまあ、今のゲーム作りっていうのはどうしても分業なので、ゲームデザインする人と物語を書く人は別なんですけども、僕の場合は一人の人間が並行して作ってますので、ゲームデザインも、物語もお互い影響し合っているというゲーム作り。
And I think in the game industry today, it's more common for the story to be written by one person and the game design to be done by another person. But in my case, since I'm thinking of both of them, I'm able to, have one complement the other as I think of both of them simultaneously.
で、オープンワールドになってもですね、ストーリーテリングの方法は変わりますけど、物語、インタラクティブな、自由度は非常に上がるんですけども、その結果、ユーザーに与える物語っていうのは今まで通り変わらないとは信じて作っています。
As far as how the open world type of system will affect storytelling, I think it will affect the way that I'm able to tell stories. Of course, the user will have a lot more freedom now, but I think the type of stories that I tell will still be fairly consistent.
自由度が格段に上がるので、これをしてこれをしなさいっていうストーリーテリングは多分通用しないと思うので、ユーザーが、自由に、ゲームプレイをしながらも、有効なストーリーテリングというか物語を、入れ込んでいくっていうちょっとこれまでとは違うやり方を。
So, it won't do just to tell the player, okay, go here, do this, and have a very linear form of storytelling. I think now that players have a lot more freedom within an open world environment, it's really up to the player to kind of create their own story as they play through the game. And I think that's something new and fresh that will come out of the next generation of games.
Okay, great. Now, as a big movie lover, I understand that you also try and watch a film every day as well. It's very much a habit of yours, and it's well known you've long harboured a desire to make a movie yourself. So I'm just wondering what's stopping you making a movie, and what sort of story would you like to tell the film, and your experience as a games designer, what do you think you would bring to the big screen?
映画が作りたくて、映画が作れなくてゲーム業界に入ったんですけども、やっぱり映画よりもそのインタラクティブなメディアっていうのは非常に面白くて、それでやっぱりその先ほど言いましたけど、自分の思うようなものが作れない限りちょっと映画にはちょっと戻れないかなと。
Well, if I go back to my roots, originally I entered the game industry because I wasn't able to enter the film industry. And I love film, but once I started creating games, I realized that games are really fascinating, and it's a lot of fun to create games. And as I said earlier, I still haven't been able to achieve that image of the perfect game that I had in my mind. So I still want to continue creating that interactive form of storytelling.
ゲームの原作でいい映画は今のところ皆さんもご存知ですけどないと思います。
And needless to say, I think most people in the audience know that as far as movies based on games, up until this point, there haven't been any success stories.
ゲームってインタラクティブなメディアなので、もともとほとんどのゲームが、世界だけあってストーリーっていうのはほとんどないと思います。
And I think one of the reasons for that is that games are an interactive medium. So really, they create a scenario, setting for the player to interact with, but there's not really a compelling story there for a lot of games.
でハリウッドはそのタイトルが欲しくて、ストーリーがないものを、無理やりストーリーをつけて映画化すると、ゲームの面白さとは全然違うものになってしまうので、映画ファンもゲームファンも納得いかないということになります。
And of course, what happens is Hollywood sees that the games are popular, they try to pick it up, and they create a story and try to basically force a story onto that game. And in the end, it doesn't work because you end up with something that's neither the game nor a good movie. So fans of the original game won't be satisfied, and movie lovers won't really be satisfied with it either. So it doesn't really hit any particular target.
でメタルの映画はその辺はプロデューサーの人も分かっていると思うので、期待していただいていいかなと思います。
So that's the problem that I'm trying to remedy with the upcoming Metal Gear Solid movie. And I'm sure most of you know who's producing it, and I hope you have confidence in that movie because I feel it will turn out well.
There's a lot of, you've acknowledged a lot of turkeys that have been turned out based on movies based on video games. Are there any films that you think have actually done a good job of conveying a gaming experience on the big screen?
Honestly, I can't think of any. I think as far as I guess reaction, games that have done game movies that have done well, I guess Tomb Raider was pretty good. As far as sales are concerned.
But Metal
メタルギアとか作ってくれてますかね。そんなん欲しくないですかね。
So yeah, so we're not going to make a Metal Gear with no action or anything like that.
Okay, great. Now, when you look at the video games industry as it is today, what excites you about it, and what frustrates you? What disappoints you? I suppose with specific regard to the way stories are told in games.
ストーリーテリングというか同じような世界観ばっかりのものが今現在新作で出ていますので、続編じゃないにしても同じような世界観で同じゲームシステムというのをあまり、クリエイターとしては、興味がないです。
I guess you can say that one thing that I'm not really satisfied with is that most of the games that are released these days tend to be very similar. Even if it's not a sequel, the stories and settings that are in the games are very similar to other games and what have come before. So it's not very creative.
映画とか小説でできないような世界観とか物語とかっていうのはやっぱりゲームならでは、ゲームでしかできないようなことは可能だと思うので、そういうものを僕らは作らないといけないですし、そういうものを皆さん待ってると思いますので、僕らもそうですけど、ゲームならではの世界観で物語、ストーリーテリングができるようなものを作っていこうと。
but I do believe that games have the potential to achieve something that neither movies nor novels can achieve. You know, it's a unique form of storytelling, and I think that game creators should really strive for that. And I believe that's should be the mission of all game creators out there, is to create this new, unique form of storytelling and explore it to its fullest. And I think the users as well, the players, want that, and I believe really that it's my mission to provide that for them.
Well, with that in mind, then, I mean, what would your personal vision for games be, for the future of games as a storytelling medium, and what sort of games do you think we'll be playing and you'll be making, hopefully, in 5-10 years' time?
10年どんどんハードが進化してますので、昔のようにルールで縛ることはできない。ほとんどリアルな日常に近い世界観の表現とか操作感になると思うので、昔みたいにスゴロクとかそういうルールでゲームを作るっていうのは難しいと思います。
Yeah, so first of all, I think as hardware evolves, games will become more and more realistic, and the user will be given a lot more freedom. Also, the way you interact it will become more natural. There will be other ways to interact with the game world. So I think games will evolve to a point where you won't be able to force rules down the player's throat. You really have to think of other ways to have them interact with the game.
なので時間軸を設定して映画のようにレールを引いてそこをユーザーに歩かせるっていったようなストーリーテリングじゃなくて、もっとユーザーにどんなことでもできる、自由にどこに行ってもいいっていうような自由度を与えながらもそのストーリーをいかに伝えるかっていうことをやっていかないといけないかなと思ってます。
So I think it's very important that you don't just mimic the storytelling style of movies. So for example, don't make the player just walk from a certain point A to point B and force them down that path. You really have to give them options and find a way to tell the story and express the story within that wide range of freedom.
今のゲームのストーリーテリングってほとんどがライドもの、お化け屋敷という乗り物に乗ってレールをずっと行くとここでお化けが出たりとかっていう、ここで火が出たりとか、そういう、レールに乗せているのが多いんですけども、これからはやっぱり自分の足で、後ろにも行けるし右にも行ける、立ち止まることもできるっていうようなそういう自由感の中でいかに物語を伝えるかっていうのは、重要になってくるかなと思います。
So I think games up until this point, and most of the games that are out today, are basically on rails. If you compare it to something out there, it's like a ride, right? You're on a rail. Maybe a monster pops out every once in a while, or flames burst out from the side of the rail. But you're not really in control of it. But from this point on, I think it really will be the users controlling all the actions. You're walking wherever you want. You can stop. You can go backwards. You can turn right. You have total freedom, and I think it's really exploring those options that will make interesting games from this point on.
Right, so lots to look forward to. Well, thank you very much for answering my questions. We go to the audience now. We've got some pre-submitted questions, and there is a roving mic wandering around. So if you do get to ask a question, please wait for the microphone and give us your name and where you're from as well, which would be great. The first question, please, from Helen Lewis.
Hi, Helen Lewis, New Statesman. You talked about controlling both story design and game design, and I wanted to ask whether or not you consider yourself an auteur, and is that even a useful concept to apply to video games rather than films?
さっき言いましたけど、ゲームのコンセプトとか、ゲームデザイン、それからその中での操作感とか演出とかメッセージとかシナリオを全部僕の方で制御していますので、そういう意味では通るっていうことになるかもしれません。
So as explained previously, I do come up with the game concept, manage the design, the gameplay, the presentation, and everything else. So from that point of view, I guess you could say, in a way, yes, I could be considered an author in that sense.
なんですけど、僕のやり方が結構インディーズ映画の、作り方に近いんですけども、やっぱりそのハリウッド式の大型の、プロジェクトになるとどうしても分業になりますんで、そうなると、今のような仕事の仕方は難しくなってくるんで、そういう意味では僕はその本当の最後のゲームでのオトールっていう世代になるかもしれないです。ちょっと答えになってますけど。
But that said, I do think that that particular style of game creation is very much like an indie film. It's very unusual, And I think games from this point on are getting bigger, higher budgets, just huge games. And I think there really is no choice but to split things up at a certain point. And I think the auteur concept in games is really a dying breed, and I'm afraid that probably my generation will be the last who can really make that claim. Unfortunately, well, not really an answer to your question, but that's basically what I think.
Okay, thanks for your question. Next question, please, from Gavin Devine, or Devine, is it?
Gavin Devine, Glasgow. Thank you for the talk tonight, Hideo Kojima. When you create a game, do you stick to your own vision, or do you take into consideration outside influences such as community expectations?
最初のビジョンというのは当然僕の中で生まれるものです。
Well, first of all, the original vision, comes from me, from within myself.
ゲームの遊び方とか操作感とか、そこは僕の作家性なんで、まずそれがあります。
So the gameplay and the controls, those are all up to the game designer, and I come up with those.
で、僕の中にその仮想の人格がいっぱいいるんですね。今まですれ違った人、付き合った人とか、家族とか、友達とか、あるいはその映画で見た人とかっていう自分じゃない人格になって、自分が考えたビジョンが正しいかどうかっていうのを次のステップで、試行錯誤します。
And within myself, I have a lot of imaginary personalities, I guess, within my head. People that I've met in the past, family members, friends, characters in movies. And so I kind of bounce my ideas around in my head, and within the context of those various personalities, and try to ask myself if I'm on the right path.
で、それだけでは当然足らないので、次のステップとして、ティザーとかトレーラーをショーとかで、あるいはインターネットで発表して、その反応を見ます。
But then of course that's not enough. So what I do next is I create a teaser or a trailer, and I put that out there at a game show or on the internet, and I wait to see what the response is like.
当然それをフィードバックして、細かい微調整をしていく。
And based on feedback from that, I make minor adjustments and tweaks at that point.
で、実際に操作感なんかもっと詳しく、実際に体験版とかゲームショーに出展して、それを、ずっとこのユーザーの反応を見ながら、それをゲームに取り入れるという形をします。
And I think especially for things like the gameplay control and things like that, it's useful to put it in front of people and have them play it at game shows or through demos and get some detailed feedback.
でなんですけども、最初に考えたゲーム性というか、こういう遊びでこういう面白さを作りたいっていう最初のビジョンが、ユーザーに例えば否定された場合は、その企画をボツにすると、いうことをしています。
However, I do not change the core gameplay concept. That's something that I need to remain true to my vision. And if it comes to a point where all the users don't like the core concept, then that's not something that I can adjust. That is something that I just have to throw away at that point, because it's not a valid concept.
一番良くないのはですね、根幹となるゲーム性を、ユーザーの意見をフィードバックすることでどんどんこう変えていくことで、当初のビジョンとは全然違うものになってしまう。これは一番ものづくり、ゲーム作りで一番危険なことなので、それは絶対しないということで、それはうちのスタッフにも言っていることです。
And I think the worst thing that can possibly happen is to really lose sight of your original vision. If you put it out there and you just get feedback from users, but you lose sight of what you originally intended to do, the game ends up going down a completely different path, and it never ends up well. And I definitely do not do that. And I tell all of my team members never to do that as well, and it's something that you have to be careful of when creating games.
There you go, very detailed answer for you. Now, does anyone else have a question? Raise your hand, please, if you do. The gentleman just here in the middle. If you could just wait for the microphone to come to you, please.
Thank you very much for... Hello?
Microphone problems.
Loudly, but...
Oh no, don't bring it back.
Oh,
there we go.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. It's fantastic. I had a question because obviously you were inspired by films and you and by a lot of Western movies as well. One thing that's fascinating is you said earlier that you think that games are all becoming the same thing. and now repeating themselves. What's interesting is that a lot of games have actually been inspired by your games so much that it's almost like a snake eating its own tail. And I don't mean Solid Snake, but figuratively speaking. But there's also lots of originality happening in games. There are games like Flower, of course, which is like an abstract poem turned into gameplay. There's a lot of great stuff happening on the mobile, on mobile systems, on iOS and things. Don't you think that there's a lot of originality outside of the AAA sector that we can't sort of overlook as well?
僕らの時代っていうのは自分が絵を描いたり小説を書いたり、ゲームを作ったりしても発表の場がなかったんですけども、今はネットを使えば世界中に自分の作品を配信できるので、それを使ってこの世に存在しない新しいものを作れる。
I do think that that's a very valid point, and I think, in my generation, it was impossible for one person to create something by themselves and get it out there and publish it themselves. But nowadays, with the internet, everybody has the power to become a game creator. You can create something and put it up online, and anybody can download it. So I think that's a very valid point and a valuable tool as well.
そうなんですけども、要はコンソールで、ハイエンドでトリプル A のタイトルとかになるとすごくバジェットがかかってくるので。 そこでやっぱり新しいものをチャレンジするとやっぱりスポンサーも結構リスクを背負いたがらないのでそれは非常に難しいと思います。
But I do think that certain things can only be achieved with AAA budget, and if you want to make a really big game, it involves risk, and you need a huge budget, and I think at that point, that's when things become very formulated and stale at that point.
僕でも 例えばメタルギアっていうメタルギアソリッドを作りますというと会社はいくらでもお金出してくれるんですけど、オリジナルになると結構厳しいと思います。
So that even applies to me as well. If I tell a company that I'm going to make another Metal Gear title, they give me all the money I want. But if I say I want to make an original title, they're not quite as cooperative.
ハリウッドとかでもよくあるんですけども、まずインディーズの人が バジェットがないので最初の映画の10分とかをあるいはトレーラーだけを撮ってネットで公開して資金を仰ぐっていう手法があると思うんです。これがこれからどんどんメジャーになると思います。
But I do think one thing that's on the rise is similar to what happens with some indie movies is maybe you'll create the first chapter or like the first 10 minutes or something, put that out there, get response, and then raise funds from that and get sponsors. So I think that's something that's on the rise, and I think it's something to keep an eye on.
で僕がやろうとしているのはテレビシリーズのパイロット版みたいな感じで新しいゲームの、ワンステージというか一番面白いところだけを作ってそれを、配信してで評価が良ければ後半全部作ると、テレビシリーズのワンシーズンを作るみたいなことでやれば、新しいリスクを背負わずに新しいものを作れるかなと。
One thing that I personally would like to try is something similar to a TV series where you create like a pilot episode, you put that out there, you put that out there, you see how the fans react to it. If it does well, then you continue it along those lines, and you create a full season. If it doesn't, then maybe you have to go back and adjust things at that point.
当然配信して人気がなければ後半は作れないということです。
And of course, it's very possible that if you put out there and it's absolutely not popular at all, then that may just be the end of it at that point.
Okay, great, thanks. See some more hands for questions, please. Gentlemen right down here at the front, please. Just hang on for the microphone.
Hi, Alexei Lungat. Hi, nice to meet you, Mr. Kojima. I have a question about specifically Metal Gear series. All through Metal Gear games, you can see the progression of the games more towards the open world environment, obviously Snake Eater and then Metal Gear Solid 4. So now they're ground zeros. My question is the open world Metal Gear kind of your ultimate version or vision of Metal Gear, or are you planning to go even further than that?
ゲ 基本的にはですね、ミッションがあってで、どこどこに行って誰々を救出しなさいというミッションがあった場合に、そこにドラマがあるんですけども、自分で、潜入方法も決めたいですし、何時に出発してどこでどうしてっていうのを自分で決めたいので、オープンワールドというかその自由度ですね、ユーザーが自由に決めれるっていうのを重視しています。
So, I think, first of all, if you give somebody a mission, you say, okay, your mission is to go and rescue this person, already you create some drama there. However, if you take that a step further and say, give the person the power to decide how they get there, what time they arrive, what kind of path they use to sneak into the base, then it creates even more drama and gives them more freedom. So, it's not so much that I've been aiming to create an open world game so much as I just want to give player freedom, the freedom to do things the way that feels natural to them.
ユーザーの方が100人いて、100人が100人同じ時間に同じ装備で同じルートで潜入して帰ってくるっていうのはこれ今までのゲームなんですけども、そうじゃなくてユーザーの100人の皆さんが自分で考えた時間に自分で考えた装備で自分が考えたルートで行って帰ってくる、帰ってくれない人もいるかもしれないけど帰ってくるっていうことで100人のストーリーとか100人のドラマができると思うので、まずはそこを狙ってます。
So up until this point, if you had 100 people and you had made them play a game, they'd all basically arrive at the same time, take the same route, use the same equipment to get the job done. But what I want to do is, from this point on, is give people the freedom. So if you have 100 people and you give them this mission, they'll all come back with 100 different stories. They may arrive at a different time, use a different route to get to the base, use different weapons and equipment. So rather than having one great dramatic story, you have 100, and that's really what I want to accomplish.
なのでオープンワールドが最終目標じゃなくて、いかにその自分らしい潜入ができて、その潜入の結果、自分だけの物語が、作れるかっていうそういうのを、目指しています。
So it's not necessarily, again, that I'm aiming for open world. That's not the end all. What I want to do is give people freedom to create their own stories and create something that's very personal to them. And that's what I want to accomplish.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
your question. Now, move on to another pre-submitted one now from.
I'm Marty from London. Okay.
Nice T-shirt.
We know a lot of your inspirations from male protagonists of Metal Gear Solid, but what are your inspirations for the female characters? I especially want to know about the boss and Eva.
女性キャラに関しては、僕は男性なんで、やっぱりこうあってほしい女性とか僕が好きな女性とか、こういう女性がいたら面白いなっていうことで結構リアルじゃなくてもうちょっとこう、なんていうのファンタジーというか、男性が思っている女性像を強く出して作ってます。
First of all, when it comes to female characters, I myself am male, so in a way, I guess you could say that the female characters I create are kind of like my ideal. It's kind of my fantasy. These are the type of female characters that I like, and so that's what I make.
子供の頃から科学者というそのインテリなキャリアウーマンみたいな、すごく感情的で強くて優しいようなそういう女性に憧れたことが多かったので結構そういうキャラがメタルである。
And ever since I was young, I've always been fascinated with very intelligent career women, or, scientists and people like this. Somebody who's very, ambitious, but also has a lot of is able to express a lot of emotion. And so those are the type of female characters that I put into my games.
なんですけど、MGS2 のローズっていうキャラクターは結構皆さん嫌いですよ。
But that said, I think there was one female character, Rose, and I think she wasn't too popular. You guys not like her?
彼女は実際に僕が付き合った女性とか知ってる女性の、性格を合成して作ったので非常にリアルなキャラクターです。だからその戦場で男たちが戦っているにもかかわらずリアルに会話してくるっていうそういうのを狙って作ったキャラクターなんですが、結果的にはうまくいかなかったと思います。
And ironically, she was the one female character that I kind of tried to base on actual people that I knew. So she was based on past girlfriends or female acquaintances that I've known. And she was supposed to kind of be the character who even within this fantasy game where these men were going to war, she was like the real character who would come and talk to the player. And ironically, nobody liked her.
必死で戦っている時に、無線で連絡してきて、今日は何の日か知ってるっていうのを、聞いてるっていう、それは自分の経験から出た、そのセリフというキャラクター像です。
So, for example, while the player is out doing a mission, she'll call over the codec and maybe ask the player, "Hey, do you know what day it is today?" And that's something that actually happened to me. Of course, I've gotten calls like that before, so that's why I was in there.
Thank you. Who else has got a question? Sort of hand show. Right at the back, please. I guess. Hang on a second for the mic. There we go. That's the one. Right.
Hi. In the video beforehand, before Mr. Kojima came in, he explained playing stories as games as a child, hide and seek. Throughout Metal Gear Solid, we've gone through one concept of sneaking around, basically hide and seek. My question is, do you think games today have too many kind of ideas in them, too many kind of different concepts all kind of crammed into one?
Thank you.
まさに僕はそう思いますけど、例えば、僕のメタルギアソリッドというかくれんぼをさせたい、かくれんぼの緊張感っていうのを皆さんが遊んでほしいと思って作ったんですけども、実際にそれが市場的にいらないものであれば成り立たないので、そこが重要だと思います。
I do agree, and I do think that's a common problem. Of course, Metal Gear was based on the concept of hide and seek, and I wanted people to experience that tension that you experience when you're playing hide and seek. But that said, if it's something that the marketplace isn't ready for or the marketplace doesn't want, then I think that also is a factor that has to be considered.
FPS とか宇宙人と戦うゲームばっかり、あるいはゾンビと戦うゲームばっかりですけども、それが多分、市場性があるから作られているという事実なので、その中で新しいものを作っていった方が、僕的にはものすごく新しいものっていうのは作りたいわけですけども、市場性を考えると今ある皆さんが欲しがっているような中で自分の個性をぶつける方が、いいのかなと思います。
So, for example, if you look at a lot of the games out there, there are a lot of first-person shooters based on sci-fi, space battles, or aliens, things like that. It's very common, and I do think that it's because there is a marketplace for those type of games. People keep on buying them, but I think it is important to keep an eye on that marketplace and aim to please them, but do something new within those boundaries. So that's something that I feel that I have to struggle to accomplish as well.
No, I saw a hand shoot up at the back before. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Dave Cook, VG247. I'm just curious about the very first Metal Gear game from 1987. The NES version was farmed out to Ultra Games, right? And it was nowhere near as good as the MSX version. It was chopped and changed. The Metal Gear wasn't even in it, which was stupid. Just wondered what went wrong there, what your sort of opinion is, and if you could go back and fix it, what would you change?
It was just all around bad.
僕ファミコン版は全然関与してないんですけども、アメリカで100万本売れました。
So I wasn't involved with the Nintendo version at all, and yet it sold a million here in America.
ものすごくもう嫌な思いをしてですね、全く遊ばなかったんですけども、ある日、おもちゃ売り場に行くとワゴンセールでほとんどただ当然の、値段で売ってたんで、ちょっとかわいそうなんで僕買いました。
And of course, I didn't really like what was going on, and I never played the game because it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But then one day I saw it in a bargain bin, being practically given away for free, so I bought it out of curiosity.
で家帰ってファミコンで遊んだんですけども、オリジナル版は、いきなり、要塞の中から始まります。MSX 版。
So the MSX version, it started immediately while you're embarking on your stealth mission.
でファミコン版は、その要塞の手前の、ちょっと手前から始まります。
But the Famicom version or the Nintendo version started a few steps ahead of that before you embark on your mission.
でその建物に潜入したいんですけど、歩いていくとですね、ドーベルマンがいます。
And you're trying to make your way to the building that you have to infiltrate, and these Dobermans come out.
ドーベルマンにどうしても見つかってしまって、何回やってもゲームオーバーなんで、もうこんなクソゲーはないと思って、それからやってます。
And honestly, no matter what I could do, I could not get past that stupid Doberman. And I just got frustrated with it, and I never played it from that point on. I couldn't even get to the first stage without feeling frustrated, and that's just terrible.
で僕はその最後までやってないんですけども、そのやったスタッフに聞くと、最後メタルギアが出てこないと。なんか巨大なスクリーンが出てきて、メタルギアっていうタイトルなのにメタルギア出てこないんで、ちょっともうありえないと思いました。
And although I didn't play the game all the way through to the end, I have spoken to people who have, and I've heard that it's a Metal Gear game, but there's actually no Metal Gear in the game. At the end, there's a giant computer monitor, and when I heard that, I just thought, that's just not right.
Okay, any more hands for questions, please? Yes, on the end.
Hi, I'm John Jones. Has being a father changed the way you design your games? Specifically, do you always feel that you have to try to teach the player something about themselves, or are you primarily interested in entertaining them?
そうですね、大きく変わりました。
First of all, I'll say that yes, it has changed me quite a bit.
ものづくりは変わってませんけど、やっぱりその、自分のことじゃなくて次の世代に、このゲームが何の役に立つのかっていうのを常に考えるようになりました。
I guess the way I create games hasn't really changed, but what I think about now is not just creating something for myself, but creating something for the next generation and what I can pass on to the next generation.
自分がこの世から亡くなった時もそのゲームをゲーム介して、次の世代に何かを伝えたりとか、当然暇つぶしとか面白いだけじゃなくて、そのゲームをやったことで次の世代の人たちが、次の世代を作れるような何かしらの、手伝いができるっていうそういう、ことを、子供ができてからは強く。
So I find myself thinking about what will happen after I'm gone from this world. What will I leave on to the next generation, and what can I do to have a positive influence on them? So rather than just creating a game where you kill time or just have fun with it, of course that's important, but I also want to do something that's useful to the next generation, that's useful to the people who play it, and really think about what kind of influence it'll have on them and their lives. And after becoming a father, that's become something that I think about a lot.
どうしても子供がいないときは、今を楽しむっていうかですね、あるいは2、3日未来しか考えてなかったんですけども、子供ができるともっと将来のことを考えて今すべきことをしないといけないと思いますので、そういう、意識とか視点をゲームとしても、入れ込みたくなります。
So of course, back when I was single and had no kids, I didn't really think that much about the future. Maybe my future planning was limited to about 3 days. But now that I have a child and I'm a father, I think about these things. I think about what's going to happen down the line, and it's really changed my perspective on things and how what I put into my games.
Thanks, great question. Any other questions, please? Yes, gentleman there with your.
Hello, my name is Cassim from London here. So we talked a lot about vision and concept today, and we've seen Metal Gear change slightly, and especially with the Metal Gear featuring Raiden, which is taking a more hack and slash approach. So I was just wondering, Platinum are collaborating, wondering how firstly that came about, and secondly, why them? What were they able to bring to the table that's drastically different and changes from that hide and seek mechanic?
Thank you.
メタルギアソリッドって、ステルスゲームなんですけども、その中でスネークと、そのライデンというキャラクターが出てきました。
Well, first of all, Metal Gear Solid as a series does have, a few main characters. One of them Snake, and of course Raiden is another main character.
で、ライデンというキャラクターを使って最も彼のかっこよさとか、そのキャラクターを立てるゲームは何かというとやっぱりアクションなんです。
And if we're going to make a game based on Raiden, we have to make something that takes advantage of his unique characteristics, and that turns out to be, it is an action game.
なので、ライデンを、主人公にするということであれば、ステルスというよりももっとこう、スピーディーなアクションということで、現在のライジンの方向性を、出しました。
So, even though the series up to this point has been stealth, if we're going to make Raiden the main character, it just made more sense to have it be more of an action-oriented title, and so that's why we made that decision.
MGS2 で主人公がスネークじゃなくてライデンになったことで、この皆さんは結構がっかりした人がいると思います。
And if you recall back in the days of Metal Gear Solid 2, when Raiden was the main character in a stealth game, he wasn't all that popular.
MGS1 でスネークっていうのがすごく、世界的にキャラクターが立ってしまったので、新しいプレイヤーが伝説の傭兵を、操ってすぐゲームオーバーになるっていうのはこれちょっとこう設定的におかしいんです。
And originally the reason I did that was because if you're playing this legendary character like Solid Snake, and you're a new player playing the game and you die, it just doesn't make sense story-wise. Why would this legendary, super powerful character just die, within the first few moments of the game?
なのでライデンという新しいキャラクターを作って、スネークはその、自分が操作できない客観的に見えるキャラクターとして存在させました。
And so that's why I created Raiden. So Snake was kind of like the character that you look up to. He was the hero. But Raiden was the new guy, and new players could play Raiden, and it would make sense that they weren't the ultimate badass.
で、面白いのはですね、プレイヤーっていうのはやっぱり自分が操作するキャラクターなんで、自分が操作できないスネークをよりかっこよく見るわけです。
And it's an interesting thing, when the player is playing a character and they see Snake as a non-player character, he looks even cooler for some reason. It's a psychological thing.
で、スネークを操作したいっていうのはそこにあったと思います。
And then I think because of that effect, Snake looked even cooler because he was kind of like this mentor character. And I think from there, people wanted to play Snake even more, and he became even more popular as a result.
で、MGS4 ではその逆で、スネークをプレイヤーが操って、すごくかっこいいライデンが現れて、で、皆さんはライデンを操作したいという、それを言い出したと。
And then what's interesting is that it flipped around when we brought out Metal Gear Solid 4. So in Metal Gear Solid 4, you were controlling Snake again, but then a really cool, badass Raiden appeared. And the player was this time looking at Raiden saying, hey, that looks really cool, I'm going to control Raiden now.
で、今回はその MGS4 ですごくかっこよかったライデンをフィーチャーして、それをプレイヤーの皆さんに操作してもらおうと思ってライデンを作ってます。
And so the concept behind Rising was, okay, let's give the player the chance to play this really cool cybernetic ninja Raiden. And so that's how the concept for Rising was born.
Thanks. A question from Matthew Reynolds, please.
Hi, Matthew Reynolds, Digital Spy. What is your favourite game that you've played this year and why?
That's a tough question. Rising?
非常に忙しくてですね、グラウンドゼロとか、他のプロジェクトもあって、で、あまりできてないんですよね。その後ろで見てることはあるんですけども、 自分でじっくりプレイする時間がなくて、そんな中でライジンの結構チェックをやらされてるんで、一番ゲームプレイをやってます。
In all honesty, though, seriously, unfortunately, I don't have enough time to play games as much as I would like. So I, of course, keep up to date and I see what's out there. I sample games here and there, but I think if you ask me what game I've gotten most into, it would have to be Rising because it comes my way and I have to check it, and I've been playing it a lot. Just unfortunately, I just don't have as much time to play Rising or play games in general as I would like, since I'm so busy with Ground Zeroes.
And since we're in BAFTA, actually, do you have a favourite movie of the year?
はいはい、一番好きな。今年ね、今年はアルゴ。
This year with the Algo.
ベン・アフレックの来週か再来週公開でした。
It's a Ben Affleck film. I believe it's being premiered next week, maybe the week after. I think maybe it's going to come, maybe next month sometime.
ベン・アフレック監督主演のアルゴ。
But yeah,
お金もらってませんから。
Algo starring Ben Affleck is a great film. You should see it, and I'm not being paid to say this.
I'm going to see your posters now around London. Right, any further questions? Gentleman right down here in the front row.
I can shout if need be. Thanks, from Next Gen Gaming Blog. With a movie, there's a very clear commitment of time from whoever's watching the movie. It's only going to take around 2 to 3 hours, whereas when games can get into the dozens of hours, there is the possibility that people stop playing them. Do you feel that you need to distill or condense your vision into smaller chunks to keep people engaged? What sort of thoughts go into how you pace your games?
やめるというよりもですね、ずーっと、ゲームをやってる人はまずいないと思います。
First of all, you said people who maybe stop halfway through a game. I think it's not just that. I think really there's nobody who plays games constantly.
要はそのバーチャルの世界で遊んでて、その学校行ったり会社行ったり家族と遊ぶために一回自分の現実に戻りますよ。で、この時非常に重要です。
And no matter what, a game is a virtual world, and you do spend a certain amount of time within that world, but you also have a real life that you have to come back to. You have to go to school, or you have to go to work. And I think it's important as a game creator to keep that in mind.
なので現実に戻りながらももう一度あの世界に帰りたいというのを常に思わせる工夫が非常に重要です。
So I think it's very important to create games in a way that a player can walk away from it at a certain point and feel good about it and still want to come back to it later on to continue.
Okay, right, I think we've got time for about one more question. That's the final question. Right smack bang in the middle there, please. Final question, make it a good one, no pressure.
Hi, Johnny Cohn, freelance. In the past, I have to say first off, MGS3 is the reason why I want to become a games journalist, and I thank you for that. One of the main reasons why I enjoyed MGS3 is because of the boss character. You said in the past that if outside the Snakes you'd like to make a game based on the boss or Cobras. But did you create the boss in mind as a potential lead character whilst making MGS3, or did the positive reaction from the community possibly lead into that kind of direction for the future?
Thanks for your question. Good question.
当然スネークと、スネークっていうのはその大体、不正のゲームだったんですけども、メタルギア母性のゲームっていうのを作りたいと思って、創作したのがザ・ボスっていう、母親みたいな存在のキャラクターを作ったザ・ボス。
First of all, I think up until that point, Metal Gear had always been a very paternalistic kind of game, but I wanted to make something that had more of a motherly character, and that's where the concept for the boss came from.
作った時当然、彼女を主人公とか全然考えてなかったんですけども、やっぱりすごく印象が強いらしくてですね、 皆さんの感想とかも聞いてるうちに、スネークっていうすごい強いキャラクターなんですけども、ライデンはまたちょっと違う印象ですけども、スネーク同等のキャラクターをメタルギアのそのサーガの中で誰がいるかなって考えてみると、やっぱりザ・ボスが一番近いので、彼女であればスネークと同じぐらい強い物語とか強いゲームプレイができるのかなと思って、考えてます。
So, in response to your question, no, I did not think that, the boss would be, I didn't think of her as a main character when I originally created that character. She just sort of evolved into that. She ended up being a very powerful character, a very attractive character to a lot of people. And I think, after especially hearing back from a lot of fans about how much they admire the boss and that character, it really made me realize that, aside from Raiden, who's just a completely different type of character, if I want to create another Metal Gear Solid with someone who would actually take the place of Snake, really I think within my mind there's really no one else besides the boss who could really pull it off.
Right, thank you very much everybody for your questions, but before we go, we are going to take advantage of the big screen here at BAFTA, and we're going to take a lingering look at the latest entry into the Metal Gear universe. There we go, exciting stuff. Now that really is all we've got time for, I'm afraid. But hopefully Mr. Kojima will be able to join us downstairs for a quick drink at the bar downstairs, courtesy of Autodesk. If you want to find out more about BAFTA's programmes, then you can, at events coming up, you can get that from the sheet you were handed out earlier. And if you want to follow more of Mr. Kojima's escapades around London, then make sure you follow him on Twitter, because there's a great photo tour going on at the moment. But in the meantime, what's left for me to do is to thank our guests tonight, so please put your hands together. Mr. Sean Eyestone and Mr. Hideo Kojima.